What's up guys, it's me Lumos Theromax, and today we're here to review the new Black Panther Wakanda Forever, and it's got a lot going in on it. And fair warning, there'll be a lot of spoilers coming up for this, so if you don't want to be spoiled, click off now. But for anybody who's actually willing to stick around and hang out for the spoiler review, this is it. So, there was a lot going on in this movie, and one of the major themes is loss, as well as like the significance of like Chadwick Boseman dying, since he had died at the in between the last Black Panther movie and this one. And honestly, that was a focal point in terms of like how all the other characters dealt with that loss, and in a variety of ways it actually managed to hold back the movie, in my opinion, because there was like a lot of focus, which made this movie very long as a result. And so that was one of the biggest major flaws. And after that, let's address one of the biggest comic book fan, I guess, arguments against it, is the changes to Namor. The changes to Namor were pretty extreme in this one. Very clearly, is he a ruthless dictator to others who try and mess with him or his people? Oh yeah, like that's definitely still there. -2 points for the green bone in between his nose, just like immediately. Like we just got to address that. That was the most obnoxious thing in the entire show. But outside of that, it was pretty interesting. They set up an interesting war between the two, and Shuri kind of has some issues with becoming Black Panther, and one of the members of the Theromax Corps actually brought up an interesting point. Well, like, did they just forget about like the tryouts to be king? And it's like, no. Essentially, it's been a year since Chadwick Boseman has died, or Black Panther has died, and just none of them really moved on from it. It seems they've had 2 deaths of kings pretty consistently, and that was just something that not even M'Baka was really willing to like jump for the throne of power, which is really weird because in the comic books, I'm pretty sure he's the guy always trying to overthrow Black Panther and take up the mantle of king when it comes to Wakanda. But I feel like if we could have just gotten like a mini movie or something that could have separated recovering from the death of Chadwick Boseman or the last Black Panther from this, I feel like this movie could have been a lot better, because it could have been a much faster pace. Namor, the way he was presented, although he kind of looked goofy, was actually done pretty well in terms of his powers. They demonstrated how physically imposing he is, how dangerous he is, as well as they just blatantly come out and say he's a mutant in this, which was pretty big in my opinion. There's a moment that he just kind of announces it, like, yeah, I'm a mutant, and like the whole crowd I was in was like, whoa, what the hell? Like, they're just coming out and saying it, like, and I think that was pretty cool. So very clearly are they throwing those ideas inside. This is just a little sprinkle that, hey, yo, we're kind of moving in that direction, which is honestly pretty good in my opinion. Combat scenes and stuff like that were all really cool. Of course, we had like a lot of the weird, goofy like outfits and stuff, just because that's I guess like a go-to for characters of these specific regions. Some of the most badass characters in my opinion were actually the not Namor, but we had like Namor, Namorita, and Atuma, and their outfits were kind of goofy, but I think their characters were very well done, even if not very accurate to their comic book counterparts. They were very imposing, and the way that they demonstrated the power set of the Atlanteans, which in this they were much more, I almost want to say like magic in terms of what they were utilizing, because they had like this siren call that they could sing out to people and make them just drown themselves in the water. It was actually pretty wild to think about, and I actually thought that was pretty wild, pretty cool in my opinion. And I look forward to seeing maybe more of the unique or interesting hacks that the Atlanteans... Oh, my bad. That's another thing we need to catch up on. You know, they're not actually Atlanteans. They are... I honestly don't even remember the name because it was so forgettable. But Talokan? Talokan or something like that is the city they're from. I'm assuming because they didn't want to copy things from DC, that they just went with a completely different, name for the city that Namor represents. And apparently Namor's entire place is built on vibranium, which is also really weird. And there was a lot of parallels between Wakanda and Talokan. It was something along those lines, because they're both like major sources of vibranium, and neither one of them want their vibranium exposed to the rest of the world because they don't trust the rest of the world. This is one of the other themes, and it essentially leads into a war between Talokan and Wakanda, because neither one of them really want the surface dwellers to have this power because they're afraid of what they'll do with that power. The Talokanians essentially were people who were being attacked by all sorts of people, most specifically the settlers, the Spanish conquistadors from really early on, in the 1600s, give or take, and they wound up ditching the surface world, praying to a god and eating a fruit very similar to the heart-shaped herb, which gave them essentially gills and allowed them to swim through the waters. And this is how they escaped essentially enslavement and torture by all the Spanish conquistadors who were killing them off via force or via smallpox. So there was like a lot going on whenever it comes to the different intermingling stories and stuff like that. And there was like this weird, somewhat kinda romance going on between Shuri, the person who ascends into Black Panther within the confines of this movie, and Namor. And they kind of hint at something's there, and she can actually she kind of views and understands why he's doing what he's doing until he tells her like, yo, we're just gonna kill everyone on the surface, and like Wakanda could be our allies. And despite this weird love-hate relationship between the two, they both kind of understand one another's perspectives, even if they don't necessarily agree on absolutely everything. But both of them definitely agree they don't want a lot of the people on the surface world getting those powers, despite their attempts even within this movie. And one of the unique things I think about this movie was, bro, they were just like, Namor shows up and he just flat out flattens Wakanda with a few of his troopers, and it was a pretty marvel to see. And he literally drowns the Queen of Wakanda, and just flat out he just drowns him, man. It was wild. And so Namor just flat out drowns the Queen of Wakanda and says, yo, like, you guys are gonna team up with us, or like it's gonna be game over for you guys. We'll just consider you another enemy and we'll take you guys out first. We don't have a problem doing that. As a matter of fact, we have the power to do it. I think he even says at one point in time, I have as many soldiers as you do blades of grass in Wakanda, which was pretty wild because all the Atlanteans are very physically imposing as compared to like a lot of, even the Wakandans, even the greatest out of any of the Dora Milaje was like getting styled on by one of their like generals as well, because they're just so much more physically impressive than anything that they could offer. They even draw comparisons between like the Hulk and Namor in this, which is backed up by like I almost said author statements, by director statements of saying he's like tied with Thor and Hulk, where he's currently at, Namor is. But it comes down to Shuri ascending into the role of Black Panther and even managing to replicate the heart-shaped herb during this. Now, whenever she replicates the heart-shaped herb, the big question was, is she going to see any of her ancestors or anything like that? And sure enough, she definitely does, but not necessarily the one she thinks. She doesn't see T'Chaka, she doesn't see T'Challa, she actually sees Killmonger. And he kind of feeds into her vengeance, her hatred, and leads her into a direct confrontation with Namor. And albeit very hard fought, she had to nerf him in order to fight him through a series of machines that she has to dry him out and make him weaker. She just flat out gets impaled against a wall with this vibranium spear that he wields. Because keep in mind, Namor and all of Talokan is wielding vibranium, so there's no real advantage in terms of what they're wielding against one another. And yeah, so like his spear could definitely penetrate her suit, and through a really hard fought battle, she barely manages to overcome him after tearing off one of his wings, bro. It's brutal, like Mortal Kombat style. And she pins him to the ground and says, yo, like, we need to negotiate. She realizes at the last minute, like, if I kill him, he'll be a martyr and no one will solve anything. Like, the war will continue no matter what, because I'll have essentially slayed their god, as M'Baku had put it earlier in the story. And so she kind of says, yo, we'll protect the waters against the surface dwellers if you just don't kill this girl. And who is this girl who's developing technology that can find vibranium, which has started this entire situation? Well, unironically, this is actually Riri Williams. And from the comics, we all know Riri Williams as the very young girl, which she's not in this, she's like 19, but the very young girl who essentially replaces Iron Man while he's like in a cyber coma that he was put into by like Captain Marvel at the time. So she of course has been working on temporary Iron Man outfits. She even utilizes one in the show, and in the final one in the final fight basically makes a suit out of vibranium, her own, basically the armor she dons in the comics, looking just like Tony Stark because somebody said she couldn't. So she helps fight in this battle. This whole war is essentially over Riri Williams and allowing her to survive. And so by allowing her to survive, they agree that the Wakandans will overlook the oceans, and a truce is called between both factions. And the end credit scene is essentially Namorita, who is like violent as hell in this, telling Namor, like, I can't believe you bowed to the Wakandans, and he says, you're seeing it all wrong. Essentially, I allowed the Wakandans to defeat me, which, I mean, if you want to look at it that way. But he says, now, not only are we more protected because the most powerful nation on the surface world is overlooking our oceans and keeping the rest of the surface dwellers in check, but they're going to go after them first because they still don't know about us. And when they do go after them, they'll look to us as an ally. We'll be their only hope. So I've actually won in this war, which is a pretty big brain move, or at least to perceive it that way as things have kind of concluded. And Shuri kind of gets her closure and finally decides that maybe looking at things a different way and accepting loss and heartache and all those things was the viable thing to do. And as she burns her funeral clothes for both T'Challa and her mother, we get a pretty big reveal that it turns out the girl we saw in the first movie, who T'Challa had a thing for, actually had a kid, and they've been keeping him in Haiti the whole time. So technically there is a prince that exists out away from Wakanda that is T'Challa's true heir, which is really interesting to think about. And on top of that, we have M'Baku seemingly taking the throne of Wakanda for the time being, as Shuri essentially just hangs out in Haiti afterwards. So it was a pretty interesting movie. There was a lot going on. It was really, really weighed down by the entire death of Chadwick Boseman, and it was really sad. Like, the whole movie is meant to be a sad lesson on loss and forgiveness and overcoming the disparity of losing a loved one. And it does its job rather effectively, but I feel like there was a whole lot in this movie, and certain aspects of that were positive, but certain aspects of it consistently throughout the entire movie held things back, and it was unfortunate at times, as emotional as it was. I just wanted to see more Namor beating ass, because the scenes he was in was really cool, even if he did look a little bit goony for like the traditional Namor that I'm accustomed to, and most fans are accustomed to, in all honesty. But if I had to, coming straight out of the movie, which my opinions always change over time, to give it like a general rating, I think that I would probably reach for, I think, 6 to 7 range. I think is pretty fair. And keep in mind, to me, whenever I grade things, we're looking at like 5 being average, 10 being amazing. and one being like, don't waste your time. So I would still consider it a good movie. Could it have been better? I think if you could have eliminated a lot of the focus on a character who is no longer around, I think it could have been a lot better. But who knows? My opinion might change over time for better or for worse, but it's definitely worth seeing. Go check it out, especially if you are really attached to Chadwick Boseman. They do a really good job of really touching up on his importance and significance within both Wakanda and the MCU in general. And if you really like this character, there's some tributes in here that I think are pretty top tier. Personally, I'm not that attached to Black Panther, so it just kind of got in the way of what it seemed like a pretty good story of two warring nations, despite everything. And I really look forward to seeing exactly how things go in the future, and if we'll get the return of Killmonger at all, because he does show up in this only as in like the ancestral plane, but he definitely has a place there for sure, and they're not letting go of him for some reason. So I look forward in terms of finding out why, and I don't think we're going to be getting another Black Panther anytime soon. So there's my general review of Black Panther Wakanda Forever. Be sure to tell me what you guys think down low if you have seen it, and tell me about any theories you guys have as to what the future of Black Panther really is, because I think there is a few avenues they can take. Obviously, they're building up a war between the surface world and the Wakandans, as well as the ocean-dwelling people of Talokan, and I wonder if we'll ever see that come to fruition, or this is just going to be a cliffhanger for the time being. I really don't believe that we've established that there's going to be anything that happens anytime soon where we left off. But who knows? And I guess that being said, we'll catch you later, Lanterns.